Welcome in to the Just Basketball Show for April 3rd. I'm Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform of choice if you have not already. 5-star reviews only. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell on the YouTube channel. Follow us at Just People Fans on TikTok, at Just Basketball Show on Instagram. We're on Twitter and Facebook as well. Maybe Mastodon one day if Twitter continues on the path that it is on. Brennan, our big thing today is going to be key storylines for the last week of the NBA season. But
we're here already.
We're here. We're recording this. We should note before the women's final on Sunday, which I'm sure we'll talk about on Tuesday, the results of that game.
If we had recorded this after that game, that would have been the entirety of what we talked about. So it's probably better for the audience that we're doing it this way, because otherwise it would have just been 2 hours on that game. We'll see what happens. But
for me personally, I don't understand why I am going to watch a Cavs-Pacers game that starts at 8 p.m. local time on a Sunday.
Suns Thunder is me. Yeah, it's not really.
Okay, but at least you got at least a little. You got a little stuff there. Like Durant's coming back. It's what do the Cavs have to play for at this point? What do the Pacers have to play for at this point? And why is this game at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on a Sunday? Does no one watch Succession? What are we doing here?
So Tuesday's pod sounds like it's going to be Caitlin Clark versus LSU recap and Succession thoughts. It'll just be the everything but basketball show that day. I guess the Caitlin Clark, that's basketball, but it'll be 2 days later.
Maybe we can give some deep breakdowns of what the Indiana Pacers offense looks like with no Tyrese Halliburton.
Great.
So
Sounds
there's
good.
Really great stuff. But the NBA and the NBA PA have agreed to a new CBA. That's a lot of word salad.
A lot of acronyms.
But this means labor peace in the NBA. It is a 7-year extension that has a mutual opt-out after 6 years. Brennan, I will be in my late 30s by the time that this CBA comes to pass. There will be a whole generation of new players in the league. This was obviously a long time negotiated. There's been a lot of pushback dates. March 31st was the initial pushback date, an opt-out kind of pushback date for both sides to get something done. And the details are starting to trickle in. We should say that we don't know everything yet. This is a massive document, and we don't know the full scope of all this shit, right? We don't fully understand every nook and cranny. It seems like every day or so, Woj and Shams and Tim Bontemps and Bobby Marks and all these people are reporting out little new details. But what we do have, I think we can dive through some of these different implications. And Brendan, I want to start with the second salary cap apron. So Woj had this first. This is $17.5 million over the tax line. And teams that are over that tax line will quote no longer have access to the taxpayer mid-level in free agency. Those changes will be eased to a salary cap over a period of years. Under these changes, signings like Golden State getting Dante DiVincenzo, Milwaukee getting Joe Ingles, Boston getting Gallo, and John Wall going to the Clippers would not have been possible.
A little different than the first two.
Little tough, but certainly this limits the flexibility of the teams that are going to spend gobs amount of money compared to some of these other teams. This was, I think, maybe Brendan, the headliner. There's some other things we'll get into, but what did you make of this specific part of the new CBA?
Yeah, well, to add in as well, it sounds like these new rules for teams at that upper echelon, which I believe is I've seen people that calculate and keep track of this stuff more than you or I say is about 2 to 3 teams per year. So we're really talking about, the Suns this year with the Durant trade, the Warriors, the Clippers, these very, very exorbitant salaries. This is not your, Milwaukee Bucks who dipped into the tax by a hair when they got Drew Holiday or whatever the case is, right? These are the very, very top. But it sounds like on top of that, loss of the mid-level taxpayer exception, they will also lose out on the ability to send cash in deals, trade first-round picks more than 7 years away, or sign players in the buyout market, or take in more money than they send out in trades. And honestly, the loss of the taxpayer mid-level is interesting to me, although, as much as people have been like, well, if you think about what the Warriors season without DiVincenzo would have been like, oh my, it's like, okay, well, really, that's because of Wiggins not being around. That's because of Steph being hurt. that one I think is getting a lot of attention because of the Warriors, frankly. I think these other things are going to be particularly punishing for these teams. Like the Suns, they were not all. I believe the Durant trade is what took them into this caliber of luxury tax payment. I don't think that they were in it already, so I guess they would have still been able to make the Durant trade. But no players in the buyout market. No ability to take in more money than they send out in trades. I mean, like the Suns this summer, and I'm not just focusing on them because I live here. It's also just a very important team that
it's practical. It's a practical example.
And they were being lauded for, getting off of, and this is going to lead into my big takeaway on this whole thing, but they were being sort of lauded for getting out of the hell of the Robert Sarver era and actually gunning for improvements for their team. They have a DeAndre Ayton trade potentially to make this summer. If they're not allowed, we don't know when these things will be phased in, like you said, but if they're not allowed to take in more money in a DeAndre Ayton trade than they're sending out, that just severely hampers them. And so you're taking these teams, and I just don't know if they were the problem here. I don't really know if they were the issue, and you're punishing them for trying to win, basically.
Yeah.
This part of it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and I think one of the through lines with a lot of the changes, and again, like we're correct to mention, we don't want to pretend like we have this whole thing figured out, but one of the through lines that I feel like I'm seeing in a lot of these changes is sort of arbitrary counterbalances to problems that either aren't really as severe as these changes would make them out to be, or aren't really problems in the first place. And I don't know what to make of that, and I don't really know why they're going after some of these things when I think there's a lot more important stuff on the table that didn't get addressed at all.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's some other things in this that I have some questions about. There are things I really like about this, kind of on paper, what we're seeing with the CBA. There are other things I don't particularly understand. We'll get to some of those, in due time. I think the other thing this goes hand in hand with Brendon. This is what the two things I linked up. They're gonna add a third two-way slot, and you may think, oh, this is a weird way to link like the cap on spending versus these two-way slots. These are kind of different things. One obviously is very expensive. One is like a pretty cost-effective like roster spot. But I think one of the side effects of this is that teams will be more inclined to be developing more than ever. And I don't know if that's there's probably an argument to me that this could eventually cost some of the older guys that have earned some money, and I don't think that's always a great thing. But I think there's going to be a world where like developing your own guys, developing guys on two ways, investing money in scouting, investing money in player development stuff that does not have limits, right? Like you can spend whatever you want on these things. You have limits
training
on
staff,
for two. Yeah,
player development, staff,
your G League program,
yep.
like all this stuff is going to have you don't have a salary cap on that stuff. I think we're going to head into a world where some of the teams at the top are really going to need to not just make the right signings in the margins for agency, make smart trades and all that stuff, but they're going to really need to nail drafts. They're really going to need to nail these two-way slots with UDFAs, their scouting departments, their analytic departments, all the teams that we can look. I think there will be a thing in like 5 years where we can look at this and say the teams that have really invested in scouting, the teams that have really invested in analytics and are kind of marrying all these different aspects of player development together too, are teams that can really succeed without having to navigate some. To me, that is like they're two opposite ends of the spectrum, two opposite ends of what's going on here. But I think kind of saying, okay, like if the Warriors can't go get Dante DiVincenzo or the Suns can't go get player X this summer because of these salary cap things, they need to think and plan in advance for that and find UDFAs, find two-way guys that they can turn into real role players.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I think that's a good way to forecast what we might see. So that's kind of the bottom and the very top in terms of player salaries and things like that. I'm really interested in the middle here as well and what's going to change.
I think the NBA is very interested in the middle. I think that's like one of the big takeaways here as far as we can tell.
Yeah, so you had a note in our outline about it sound, and this is one of the things that I think has the least details right now as we're recording, is a potential adjustment of the size and number of mid-level exceptions. So we talked about how the taxpayer mid-level for those very top tax-paying teams might go away, but it sounds like there might also be for the under the cap teams, but especially the over the cap, under the tax teams, there might be more. Right now, there basically is that $10 or so million mid-level exception. That's the one that everybody knows. And that might get bigger. There might be other types of exceptions. There might be bigger opportunities for trade exceptions, things like that. So I guess in that way, you would look at that and say those are going to be new opportunities for these middle-tier players to make more money. But when you also at the same time look at the league is apparently, according to these same reporters, looking to do away with the limit on designated Supermax rookies. So the example Woj gave in his tweet was the Cavs with Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and then Evan Mobley now coming up for an extension and potentially likely in line to get a max like those two. Now he'll be able to. And the increase in the percentage increase that an extension eligible player can get. And the example that Woj sent out with that would be guy like Jaylen Brown, guy like Domantas Sabonis, right? Even like Jeremy Grant, who's been extension eligible all year and apparently turned down the max that he was able to get with Portland. It just was not very lucrative. And so a lot of these very good players, all-star level players who weren't max guys but were somewhere just shy of that, they would always say no to these extensions because they just weren't giving them enough of a raise, and free agency was just going to be a better opportunity. I think the number is going from like 125 or 130 up to 140% of their current salary, which makes it maybe that much more likely that they say yes to something like that. So when you look at the opportunity for more designated rookie max extensions, the opportunity for larger extensions for these veterans who are on their second or third contracts, and some of the emphasis that I think this will put on getting good players on rookie deals or, low-cost deals, I think this will actually, even if those exceptions and stuff improve, I think that you're looking at a situation where the middle is going to continue to get chewed out of the league. That's what's happened in other sports. It's just sort of, I don't want to say unavoidable because I don't want to give in. I don't think it's necessarily the right ethical or utopian way to handle all of this. But baseball, that's been a massive issue for baseball. And football, it doesn't even exist really. There almost is no middle class of player in football. You're either getting paid like a quarterback or you're nothing, right?
Or at least you don't get multiple. It would seem like to me the way that I could see this going is guys that are the superstars, the all-star level guys, are the ones who get the multi-year commitments. Guys on rookie deals get multi-year commitments, but if you're in the middle, maybe you're like a year-to-year mercenary kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, and that very well. That's how we see it in football, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about the middle class? Because you seem to be a little more optimistic about how this might leave them than I was.
I don't know if I'm optimistic, but I do want to see what these exceptions are and how they work. There's things we just don't know that are accounting questions, which is not either of our area of expertise. I will be reading Bobby Marks and Brian Toporek and the CBA FAQ and anyone who Keith Smart.
Shouts
all these
to Danny LaRue.
You know how many times, Jeff Siegel's gonna block my phone number. Is what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
R.I.P. to early bird rights, man. I really, really miss early bird rights every day.
You got your sticker?
But, not anymore. But it's unfortunate.
Wow.
Yeah.
Disrespect.
Change laptop. Change the laptop case. Whole thing. So. I'm curious to see what the exceptions look like, how they work vis-a-vis this tax, how they work via the aprons. Are there still loopholes you can kind of do? But I do wonder if these end up becoming year-to-year things, and then there's more turnover, and you just see a guy who's a $7 million, $8 million player ends up switching teams every year or something like that, or just kind of is in a place for 2 years but has to re-up in a place every year, right? That's a tricky place to be, you want that multi-year security, you want those guarantees, but I absolutely could see a world where it's the guys who are no-brainers get the max deals, but maybe the Grizzlies in some ways ahead of this because of how they've kind of built their team, right? tons of draft picks, kind of bringing guys in, like David Roddy's like playing minutes for them, like Aldamas. Like they're not like relying on like going out and getting multi-year commitments from free agents. They're kind of like drafting guys they really like and kind of giving them opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, drafting well is always going to work in every sport, right? If you're amazing at drafting, it's a cheat code to get out of the salary cap rules. It's a cheat code to not have to be an attractive market. It just solves a lot of problems for you. And that's not going to ever change.
Well, but it's funny that this is coming in a world where, like, think about how many teams have traded away boatloads of future draft picks, and it's like they're going to be like sort of in this like weird place where like they can't, unless they're willing to like spend money to buy second round picks or really like get as many UDFAs as they can. They're going to be like out of the draft cycle in large part. Like, Cleveland is like this, The Lakers obviously have like some version of this, like Dallas is just getting some of its picks back. Like, the Bucks have traded picks. Like the Suns obviously have traded like a bunch of picks. Like that's these teams' reality
actually
now.
Yeah, agreed. And that's where I think the biggest change will come. And again, I can't forecast because it's never really about what the changes are. It's always about what do the teams do to adjust and how do they try to find loopholes and openings to attack and inefficiencies and all that stuff. So even really just trying to evaluate purely like, okay, the NBA thinks X will happen because they made this change. It's like, well, we'll see. We'll see what actually practically changes. But it feels to me like the NBA wanted to bring the hammer down on these high-level teams. And again, to compare it to some other sports, like I think of what the Padres and Mets have done to really piss Rob Manfred off in baseball, and they just agreed to a CBA prior to those big spending sprees, but you're seeing it in basketball. The NBA is getting its own Steve Cohen's and Peter Seidlers that are these baseball owners that are overspending and kind of throwing the market out of whack. The league is going to get more Matt Ishbias, who just bought the Suns, and more, Mark Lowry, who's buying the Minnesota Timberwolves, and Joe Tsai, who bought the Nets. That's going to be the owner class going forward, not these mom and pop, the guy who owned the Jazz, who was like a car dealership and like furniture store maven out in Salt Lake City, or the buses who, John C. Reilly's playing the dad in a, heartfelt HBO show. Like, that's not what NBA ownership is going to be anymore. And so it's weird to me that they are kind of preemptively creating these ground rules for what is increasingly going to just be the normal. That feels very strange to me. And I think from like a fan experience perspective, it feels strange to attack these people who, I understand if I'm, let's say, the Allen family in Portland, or who actually do spend, by the way, or Tillman Fertitta in Houston or whatever, that, I understand a little bit of anger and animosity towards Steve Ballmer or Joe Tsai or, the Warriors ownership or Suns ownership who are just paying to be better. I get that. I guess I understand why you want to, create parity to some degree. I think this goes a little too far. But either way, if I'm Adam Silver, if I'm in the league office, it feels to me like a little bit of a misunderstanding of what makes people love basketball specifically, right? Football, parity works. Parity is king in football. That's part of why it's always going to be dominant. That's part of why it can have, fan bases in these out-of-nowhere cities like Green Bay, where nobody should ever really be able to make millions on a sports team and do, right? But I think in basketball, people love greatness. I think people love dynasties. I think people watch because they want to see, can LeBron James take down the 73-win Warriors? You know what I mean? Can Kevin Durant come give a first-ever championship to the Phoenix Suns? That's why people love basketball, not because they want to see if the Pacers can go from 10th to 2nd. Nobody cares about that in this sport.
The where I wonder is if there's just like some trying to prevent the Durant era Warriors from happening again, and that would tend to be my guess, is that they want like a semblance of parity in that sense. That would be my guess about like some of what this kind of.
Well, the Durant era Warriors gave them the best ratings they've had in the modern era. So
yeah, but
congratulations, NBA. You're ruling out the best thing that ever happened to your sport. I don't know what's going on.
Just think about who Adam Silver answers to and who his boss ultimately is and who isn't his boss ultimately.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying. I mean, I'm not saying. Are you worried about them coming after you?
I don't disagree with you. I agree with you. My point is that I just think Adam Silver is probably thinking about this differently than most everybody else.
Well, my point is, I think that Adam Silver's bosses are the owners. Adam Silver's bosses are the Herb Simons and the Tillman Fertittas who are applying for PPP loans during COVID because they can't run their businesses, allegedly. But what I'm saying is, Adam Silver's bosses will be Matt Ishbia, Joe Tsai, Mark Lowry, Joe Lacob. Those guys are going to be who run this league before long. So I'm not really sure why there's an entire CBA that comes and goes where it feels like he's answering to these small market, poorer owners who just shouldn't have any power over all of this stuff. Shouldn't have as much power as they seemed to have here. But I think we should also, Chris, talk about some of the smaller stuff and then also the player perspective, because Draymond Green came out pretty powerfully in an angry way, I think, speaking to some of what we're talking about in terms of the middle class and players not getting a lot of wins here and the league just really turning itself upside down to punish spending. Before we run through some of the small stuff, the one thing that I have a lot of questions about that I think deserves a lot of scrutiny is some of this, the investment stuff that the players can do. I think a lot of it seems very good on its face. Like, I think players being able to invest into teams and invest into the WNBA teams and invest in different league partners is not a bad thing. But are we really going to, it's not an April Fool's joke that players can now, invest in, sports betting companies? Does that not seem, insane? That seems insane to me. As, just from, an ethical standpoint. Let them invest in cannabis companies. Let them invest in other teams. Let them invest in Fanatics or whatever other league partner they want to. I'm good with that. Mm-hmm. I don't understand how you can allow them to invest in sports betting companies, but this is also a league that was we're gonna get in with crypto, which was also a very stupid thing to get involved in. I don't understand how it's gonna be cool for James Harden or another star player or whomever to be a partner with DraftKings or those companies have every right to do business. Sports betting is a big business in the United States, but there's a line between players who are actually playing games and into sports betting and that gray, really murky area that I don't think the league should be touching. That seems very bizarre. No, it's kind of silly to me, right? We had the guy from Philly, I can't remember his name, who's buddies with Harden, who people think was a big reason.
I think Josh Harris, yeah.
Josh Harris is their owner. I'm talking about the Fanatics guy who had to divest because he was. If Fanatics is just a league partner, they wanted to get into more stuff.
Michael Rubin.
Yes, and he no longer is a minority owner in Philly because of some of these things, not even related to sports betting. So it's funny that we have these conflicts of interest perceived and otherwise, Jay-Z having to divest from the Nets because he was going to run an agency, right? But it's totally fine to have a vested interest in the financial portfolio of a company that's solely based on people wagering on the outcomes of the games that you're playing in. It's fine if people put their $5 million into that company growing, but not an agency. It is going to continue to be a collision course. But I liked on some a similar note, Chris, that licensing revenue is going to be allowed to be part of basketball-related income. I'll be honest, I didn't realize that it was. I thought at least a portion of it already was. If you had asked me that, I guess that's a short-sightedness on my part, but I think that's an area where the league is going to continue to pump investment and energy and resources. And so to have players be able to make money off of that, I do think is a win for players, because if you think about, all the growth that they're trying to create out of the app, the NBA app, what's going to happen with streaming, some of those things are going to be falling into that category. And if the league is getting more revenue directly to it from those revenue streams, the players, of course, should get in on that money. So that does feel like it might not feel huge right now, but it could be even more important. It's apparently $160 million this upcoming season. I could see that going up and the players really benefiting from it.
I agree with that, and I think it's a no-brainer. They're the ones that they're the reason people buy jerseys. They're the reasons people buy any of this stuff. No one's
nobody's buying a jersey with an NBA logo on it, right?
They're not. Well, unless you're Rob Lowe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no one's getting a Phoenix Suns Matt Ishbia jersey. No one.
No.
If anyone bought that, like, you deserve to like probably get that taken away and like made fun of.
You're a
in
cop
perpetuity.
if you do that.
Yeah, ACAB.
You're
brother,
a fed.
but yeah, you're very sus at the very least.
You're
No
the
one's
man.
like, I'll give me a James Dolan Knicks jersey. You know what I mean? Like, no one's like, no one's.
I
doing
feel like
that.
if somebody had a James Dolan Knicks jersey on, it would immediately be so out of place and obscure that I think that it would fail the surveillance testing that he's installed at the arena, and you would actually get like detained because he'd be like, "There's no way you're serious. No one likes me. Please explain yourself."
He's just like, I'm really into JD in the straight shot, man. Like, I'm just a big fan. I don't even like basketball. I just like love JD in the straight shot. And look, like, this is only going to keep growing. I think we very much see that this is like a growth thing in the NBA, and like all this stuff is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, look at what jersey prices cost. Like, I don't know how this is in Phoenix, Brendan, but like the Cavs do all these different kinds of merch drops at games now. Like, they have like partnerships with streetwear companies and different brands. And
oh yeah, back here I have from when I went to MSG last in November, there was a Kith night. You know, like the Hype Beast brand. They had like a magazine and like a towel, and then they did a whole line and they announced it that night, and they had like Fat Joe wearing like a cool jacket and whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's gonna grow.
It's gonna grow, and like there's this, like the players should absolutely be getting cuts of the money. Like that's like a no brainer to me.
Did you know that they didn't? I feel like an idiot.
I didn't either, and I felt very
It's
dumb.
crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, a couple other things. There's now going to be a 65. Let's do thumbs down, thumbs up, thumbs down on some of these, and then some of these. There's one in particular I think we'll come back to as like an episode gimmick once we get out of the regular season in that kind of nebulous zone. But 65
the weed
game,
one, is that what we're gonna do an episode on? Just like
no
taste test. Okay,
that could be fun though. Sponsors.
go ahead.
Sponsor us, companies. But first, you have 65 game minimums for awards in All NBA. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
It's a can of worms. I'm gonna go thumb sideways. I don't think it'll really change a ton, to be honest.
I'm going full Commodus all times I do these shots to Gladiator. Can't wait for Gladiator too. I'm thumbs down. Like I think teams are like someone's gonna check in for 10 seconds and like hit 65, and it's gonna be stupid.
Yeah.
It just feels like a win for a press release. Okay, All NBA is now positionless. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs way up.
2 thumbs up.
Give me the 15 best players. I don't need it to be guards and forwards and centers. It's silly.
This
like
is
the third team center this year is not going to be one of the 15 best players. We all know that. So
yeah,
no
this
need.
is going to be the episode. We're going to do. I think we'll probably do like, hey, let's pick our All NBA teams episode. I think we should do a version of that, or in that episode probably that is like, what would our, if this was positionless right now, who would our 15 be? I think that's like a very easy little thing we can do. Brendan, play the tournament, the in-season tournament coming. You know, we've seen $500,000 out there as a per player for the winning team. I don't know. I've now seen that twice. That number, Woj said on his show, kind of talking about this, that it's still being negotiated. This could start next year. Thumbs up, thumbs down on the in-season tournament.
I think it's a thumbs up for me. I think the final is cool. It's a marketing opportunity. I would love to go to that game. I went to the inaugural one for the WNBA, which has now had it for 2 seasons, and the first one was hosted in Phoenix, so I got to go. It was storm, sun, pretty good game, pretty cool little gimmick. I think that the key, learning from what the W has had an issue with, is that they need to market and explain it very well, because people won't understand which of these games are qualifiers, why does that matter, what's going on, what are the standings for this thing, who's where, what's going on. I think if you just throw them out there without any info, it's just going to end up feeling insignificant. So I think the league needs to make a push to just make it feel big and make it feel obvious. Otherwise, it'll be a waste.
I think we need to. I'm thumbs up as well. I've come around on this. I want to see how much the players care about it. That's going to be my real answer. But I think especially be fun if I don't expect like the veteran like teams that could win a title to really care about this. But I could like a team like this, or like Cleveland or Sacramento, or like the Thunder, or like some of these teams that are good and like to different varying levels of good, but like not really maybe title contenders. I think could like be like, hey, let's go for this, and I think that could be kind of cool. But I think it will need to be explained well and like I also think it's good that they're not like adding more games on top of the regular season. That it's just like part of the season, because I don't think that would have been tenable to add.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of what can make it confusing is you don't realize
100%.
Oh, this game matters for this other reason. Also, it's not just like Thunder Suns on a random night. It's okay. This matters. I think the cool part about it though too will be the dominant regular season teams, like the Bucks this year, they might have gotten in just because they won a lot of games. I don't think that the best teams are going to make, load management decisions or like injury rotation decisions based on trying to qualify for this thing. So you might get the odd, the 60-win team that's just great, but you'll also get some of these teams like Sacramento, teams like, Cleveland, whatever, that are maybe do actually find some sort of like drive in gunning for this. It gives some purpose to something else going on that, fans can show up for. It can give local fan bases something to care about, whatever. So I think we'll see some fun matchups. It won't always just be like a preview of the finals every year.
100%. No more suspension for marijuana. That's just like common sense.
Kevin Durant, the Kevin Durant legacy showing up there one more time. That's the best thing that came out of the KD Kyrie Nets. We'll say that.
Yeah. And then no one and done change. So I'm just gonna move about that. No one and done change. So no more. There's not gonna be any high school preps to pros guys for this.
How long
CBA
before we
cycle.
start talking about how it'll be in the next CBA, Chris?
2 years.
Yeah, maybe tomorrow. Well, in 2029, there might be a double draft. We'll start getting that soon.
I would be too old at that point. Okay. Brendan, let's go to our big topic today. Well, there's more CBA to come. I'm sure there'll be some things that trickle out between now and Tuesday that we'll talk about on our second episode of the week. But let's go to our key storylines for the NBA's final week. We have each prepared 4 storylines, I believe. I can go first if you would like.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to pick kind of like a... I'm not going to go my A+ one first. I'm going to go up north. Okay? And I'm just asking the question, is this the last ride for this version of the Toronto Raptors?
I have one somewhat linked to this, so we can double dip here, but I won't reveal it. Let's talk Nurse.
Okay. So Fred VanVleet also probably hitting free agency. What happens there is part of this, but Nick Nurse this week says he will see where he's at the end of the year. You have a Toronto Star column really kind of linking them to Ime Udoka to come in and replace her. Nurse is getting some link to the Houston Rockets. This just feels like it is shaping up to the end of something for me, Brendan. You read what he said. You don't really say that unless you're probably like thinking you're probably going to leave. The reporting out of Toronto linking them to Udoka seems pretty strong. He obviously has ties to Masai Ujiri, and someone was going to hire Udoka. Regardless, what happened there is obviously not great, but he's considered this really, really high end coach and won a lot of games. And someone was going to hire him. It just was a matter of when, not if. And it seems like it might be Toronto. And it also just seems like over time, Nurse is a guy that can maybe need a different voice there. Maybe you need a different kind of grading, kind of grinding personality for that locker room. I don't think that's unreasonable. I mean, it was telling to me that he went and brought in Nate Bjorker in after Nate Bjorker got fired in part because of Indiana, because of kind of the way he interacted with players, and he became a Nurse guy back there. So I just feels like there's going to be changes in Toronto. I don't know what that exactly looks like. I don't know how drastic they will be. They obviously have Barnes and Siakam and a lot of guys at the center of this. But Nurse, who won a title with them, moving on perhaps, and maybe Fred leaving as well. This feels like a trend. We're leading into a different version of Toronto coming out the other side next fall.
It's a team that's been confusing as to why it has underperformed, right? It's one of these teams where I feel like you look at the talent. Does it always fit together perfectly? I guess not, right? The way that the roster is built, it's very heavy on a certain type of player, which is this versatile 6'8" or so guy. It's nice in theory. It makes you look sexy when it comes to modern basketball, but when Fred VanVleet is the only player who can really handle the ball or shoot that consistently is on the floor, that can backfire. And so I'm not trying to say it's some sort of perfect sleeping giant that Nick Nurse just botched, but the talent is together better than I think the win totals have been, right? Even Tampa Bay, we can we can give them some slack for the COVID season when they were not even at their home arena, not even in their home country. But last year and this year,
Tampa was bad vibes.
Yeah, understandably, right? But like last year and this year, I just think they've underachieved relative to what they have. And so it's a little confusing to me why, and I guess it sort of makes you understand why a coach would be the one to fall on the sword a little bit. Honestly, my takeaway seeing a lot of this was not to, rehash things that are in the past, but it's really not the too distant past. And I just look at what they didn't do at the trade deadline, which was get rid of anybody. They actually added. And yes. I don't know where I come down on it. I think that there's something to be said for maybe they re-sign some of the players, Van Vliet or Trent or whatever, keeping OG Anunoby and just seeing how he continues to develop. It's not like his value's just tanking after the deadline. You could easily trade him at the draft and get just as much, if not more. But I look at it and I'm like, is there a little bit of a power struggle, power move happening with Masai? I don't know anything, obviously, about the background behind the scenes of this team, but the roster continuity and sort of resistance to change, coupled with Nurse not being able to get the most out of it. It's like, yeah, we know how basketball works. We know how sports works. Nurse is going to be the one to get fired. But is a coach going to fix this if Masai is sort of stuck in his ways or determined to have things be a certain way? I don't know. It's very much a push and a pull, but I guess I don't think it's necessarily fair or reasonable to kind of pile on Nurse without looking at the bigger picture.
No, I agree. I'm not even trying to pile on Nurse, but I think there's
I don't think you are, but I think if he leaves, that will be the narrative is like he failed this team or he just screwed this up or whatever, because that's what happens with coaches.
Like you do sometimes need a voice change. Like that happens, right? Like that absolutely happens where you get to a spot where you just need a different voice in the locker room. I think that's not an uncommon thing where you just kind of like, okay, like we need to hear from somebody different. And sometimes like you can like go incorrectly and do something wrong there, but like sometimes like you just need a different persona and like you just need to change it up.
There's been stuff with him and Pascal for a while, right? There was the suspension a couple years ago where he like left the game early, and then there's been some, is Pascal happy stuff that seems to kind of bubble up here and there. Neither one of us know, but that's something you could easily point to as a reason why Nurse maybe hasn't had his voice heard, right?
Yeah, I think that's correct. Just quickly before we move on to the next topic, do you like the idea of him in Houston?
So I checked out the Locked On Rockets discussion of the rumor, and Ali Khan Bijani, who's a good like X's and O's guys on the Rockets, broke down the fact that actually the limitations of what Nurse has been able to get out of the Toronto offense doesn't lend itself to kind of bringing the best out of what Houston's offense has been, in that both are very ISO heavy. And both are very much just like, let's see what our guys can do. And he kind of brought up like Houston needs more connectivity, more structure for their offense. And Nurse hasn't really given that to the Raptors. So I think Nurse, from the perspective of sort of being a more seasoned coach than Steven Silas is, maybe you just hope that like kind of behind the scenes he's able to get things together. I don't really know how much hope there is for that in Houston with how much the insiders seem to tell us things are broken and hopeless over there. But Nurse makes sense from that standpoint. I just don't know if he makes a ton of sense to be the guy who gets the most of what Jalen Green is from a talent standpoint, or what Kevin Porter is from a talent standpoint offensively.
Yeah, I think they have like a lot of other things they need to figure out that are bigger than Nick Nurse, and I don't know if Nick Nurse just is like giving you exactly kind of what you need. Like it just seems like there are bigger organizational issues, and I just like I can't imagine like the most bizarro like weird NBA summer to me would be like Harden goes back there, they get another high draft pick. Then they hire Nick Nurse. Like, what are we even doing here? Like, what is
Harden,
this just
Wemby, and Nurse all to Houston? That's what's happening. That's what's coming.
And Nurse is just like demanding Harden like play his like really connective like pressure defense, and Harden's like, I didn't do that in freaking Philly all the time. Like, why would I do that now? Like, I didn't. I came here because I love Houston, and like, I want to be here.
Trying to have a good time, Nick. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, bro.
Let's not really
I was out where they
have.
have a banner up for me till 3 a.m. last night. Like, what do you want? What do you want from me? I just it doesn't. If I was Nick Nurse, I'd be taking like a year off and just like waiting. I think like any good coach, honestly, if you leave a job, unless you're just need to be an NBA head coach and like need to do that, which like that's a Tibbs thing. Like that's a thing in European soccer, like with a lot of guys.
Worked for Thomas Tuchel.
Did not work for
Did
Antonio
not work
Conte.
for Quinn Snyder. It did not work for Quinn Snyder.
Did
in
not
my
work
opinion,
for Antonio.
I wouldn't want to land in Atlanta.
I mean, it seems like he got some personnel decision-making power there, which is like, good for him. Did not work for Antonio Conte, pretty clearly. But, yeah.
So trial and error,
like,
wins and losses. But Nurse, I agree. I mean, I think
I don't.
I wouldn't rush into a Houston role, I guess, is where I'm coming from. But that leads us to my first storyline for the last week, which is which coaches get fired. So I think, to me, I broke it down. I have 3 likelies and 6 maybes.
Okay.
So one of the likelies we already talked about, Steven Silas. And you can tell me on all these if you agree or disagree. Jason Kidd?
Yeah, he's probably getting fired.
We'll see if they like super overachieve, but they might not even make the play-in, so I'm not ready to do the overachieve idea with them right now.
Yeah.
And then Chauncey Billups.
Probably getting fired.
In Portland. Yeah. Feels like it's time, right? I don't think he's done much of anything to give them inspiration there. All right. And then the 3 maybes. Dwayne Casey, Detroit. Or do they just have him as their coach until he is 85 years old? I don't really know.
I don't. There's part of me that likes that he's like this veteran voice there, but also like maybe you need to get someone who's going to design some stuff that is really great for Cade and Jaden Ivey and whoever your draft pick is. And I think Casey's like a really good guy to have around, but maybe he's not like the right fit for that at this point.
Yeah, agreed. All right, and then Jamal Mosley in Orlando? Or I'm sorry, I didn't mean Jamal Mosley in Orlando.
Wow.
What I meant is Wes Unseld Jr. in Washington. They both got hired at the same time, and I put the wrong name
I mean,
down. Wes Unseld Jr.
The Wizards should just. I don't care who their coach is. They're probably going to be the 10th seed next year, and we're going to have the same conversation. So honestly,
and he has the connection to the franchise with his dad and whatnot. So that's why he's a maybe.
Yeah, what's the point? What's the point of that one? You know.
What's the point of the Wizards is really the question. All right, and then last maybe is Billy Donovan.
Ooh,
Chicago.
Yeah, I could see a case for it, but also just team doesn't feel like his fault.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's another thing. I just don't know what you do. What is the point of that unless you're just sure? Is the next coach for sure gonna fix things for you? I don't think a coaching change is a lock.
No, but if they kind of hit a reset and no more DeRozan, no more Vooch, let's see what we can kind of get a little younger. Maybe Donovan's not the best guy anymore.
Go the Will Hardy, the Thunder's coach whose name.
Yeah, hire Johnny Bryant from the Knicks or something like that. I think that would be a decent option. That was it though. So I have those 6 guys. Did I miss anybody? Did I? Besides Nurse, obviously we'll see, but that's 7 if we add Nurse.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to see if the Nuggets flame out if Mike Malone just gets the short
so that's
end of
the ones
stick.
that I didn't include, right? Is there's a lot of guys in the playoff range that
is there a lot?
be.
Is there a lot though? Because I feel because it's let's go through the top couple teams in each conference.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just do this exercise about how secure you would think they'd be. Let's start in the East. Bud's not going anywhere.
I mean, if Milwaukee lost in the first or second round again, I don't think they will, but it could happen.
Okay. Okay. I don't think
Bud's
anywhere.
ironclad. Yeah, Joe Mazzulla, no. I mean, they just hired him. I think Jock could get fired easily. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think Bickerstaff's going anywhere. I think that's a after next year thing. Okay, Mike Malone. I think possibly if things just go awry there, I think he would be the obvious kind of fall guy. Unfortunately for him, and I don't think that's even really fair. Taylor Jenkins.
No. Too much chaos. It's not his fault.
Yeah. Mike Brown is not going anywhere. Shouts to Mike Brown.
They're going to put Mike Brown on their Ring of Honor by the end of the season.
Good honestly, they should. Monty Williams.
I don't think Monty's going anywhere, no.
Okay. Steve Kerr, probably not unless he like wants.
He's going to be the president of the team.
Yeah, you call it
that's my conspiracy theory. Yeah,
that's NBA Succession right there. That's like the pilot is like that. Honestly, like we need NBA Succession, and like that would be like the right like structure. It's like the president of basketball operations is leaving, the coach like assumes control. I don't think Ty Lue's like in danger of getting like fired, but I wonder if at some point he just like.
I think Ty Lue could be out this year. One way or another. I don't know how it all falls out. I would say Chris Finch is definitely a candidate to be gone. On top of that, in Minnesota,
it's just like not his fault though. It's just like there's these things where I look
but
at
Tim
this
Connolly
and, like,
didn't hire him, so
yeah,
that's more where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I just empathize with them about that. All right, if you could
go
take
to your next storyline.
Well,
go ahead.
Is there a job that you would want if one of these jobs came open? You'd be like, that's the job I'd be prioritizing if I was a coach candidate.
Of the likelies and maybes that I had,
yeah. The other ones are like,
not a lot, to be honest with you. I think Detroit is a pretty interesting opportunity.
That's the one.
Because I really think Cade is awesome.
Yeah.
And then I would say Dallas just because, Luka. But
good luck with that one, brother. I don't know if that seems hard.
Yeah. That's one of my questions. You want to just go into that?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's just if you've got something Luka related, that feels like a good segue.
I have something Dallas related. I just have where are the Mavericks headed? So I watched their game on Wednesday night against Philly, and to be honest with you, I think it was the best they've looked since they traded for Kyrie, and they lost. And it was a really big bummer. Like, they actually played well. I looked it up. They had 20 more passes in that game than they've had as a season average. The ball was moving really well. I thought their defense played pretty solid. I thought Kleba had a really good game. And then late in the game, Reggie Bullock and Josh Green just missed a bunch of open threes, like 4 or 5 between the two of them on plays where Embiid was just being an absolute monster, closing off the paint, and Luka and Kyrie were kicking out, generating wide open threes, and the role players just missed them. And I like it. That makes it hard to evaluate. Like, Mavs fans hate that Kidd comes out after every game. They've lost so many close games this year, and he just says they miss shots. And it's agonizing to hear as a fan, but like, I guess it is true at times, and like, their shooters just haven't been as good. They also traded one of them, and Dorian Finney-Smith, away for Kyrie, as well as Dinwiddie. I guess they traded 2 of their shooters away for Kyrie, right? But they might genuinely miss the play-in. That's where this is right now. Luka has been, public about his upsetness for the first time.
70% chance in the right about per the basketball probabilities report that they are out of the play-in.
So they have a 30% chance of making it in?
Yeah.
That's rough, right? So, yeah, I guess if we're in agreement that is a genuine likelihood, a possibility, if not likelihood, we talked about Jason Kidd being a likely candidate to get fired because it does not feel like he is connecting. It does not feel like he has been able to make the most of what this team is, even if we all understand their roster has some limitations. The Kyrie re-signing, I don't know. I don't know if they get him back, and then you're in real dire straits.
And also just like there's parts of this Luka year that I understand like he's maybe dealing with some stuff and that's part of this. There's just like parts of the season with him that I think have been kind of pretty reasonably frustrating. Like I think complains more than any player in the league. Doesn't really try in defense, like the body language stuff with like some of the Tim Hardaway things. And like some of the shot, like when guys miss shots, it's just like he just seems like completely checked out. And like he's averaging 32. He's averaging 32.9 and 8.1 assists. Like he's having like an outrageous individual season, but it's like it is not like accomplishing anything. It is not like, but it doesn't feel like this like amazing like Luka season in that regard. Like he was like a very trendy MVP pick, and I know he might still finish like top 5.
He has been his whole career. Every season he's the trendy MVP pick.
Yeah, but it's like if he plays like this, like there's parts of this where he's just like never going to crack that upper echelon, and especially when his team just is kind of blah. And it's like, what do they have going forward aside from him? And like it's like Josh Green and Jaden Hardy and him, and it's like everything else. You're just like I don't know if like we're gonna have this guy in 6 months, or if this guy's like good enough to compete with Luka. Like they just feel like, and like even if they got a different head coach, like what head coach is like what is like the path to getting like the most out of Luka? Like I don't even understand how to answer that question.
Well, that's one of the
That's
things is like I don't even think it is though. I think that you just need a coach who's gonna come in and say, "Hey, brother, the way that you're playing basketball, not gonna win." There's versions of how you have played basketball that will win. And you can do that. You've done it. Let's do that again. Like it's right there. Like this is the rant that I went on with when we were talking about him a couple weeks ago. Is like you watch his Real Madrid tape when he was a prospect. You watch how he played even early on in his career, when especially his rookie season when he was not really ball dominant at all. He was kind of not fighting for minutes, but getting his feet wet, getting his place in the team and in the game. It was off-ball screens, it was dribble handoffs, it was let me get downhill, let me find the lob, the roll man on a lob, let me find shooters, etc. Now it's just like let me back somebody down at the elbow or in the mid post, and I'll either get a free throw, I'll make a fall away jumper, or I'll kick it out one pass away for a three, and that's you can cheat offense in the NBA these days if you have enough shooting around you and the refs are on willing to call those fouls, which they are, but it's not gonna win a championship. That level of how much that stuff has just overwhelmed their offense. So I feel like there's a version where I don't even want to say like an old school coach, but somebody who's going to come get his respect, get him on the same page, and say, here's a system that can work for us, right? And here, I think re-signing Kyrie is really their only option. They have to just hope that happens. I don't think that they... What about Christian Wood? Is there any point in trying to bring him back?
I mean, maybe. I mean, like, yeah, from like a talent retention perspective, but like, is he... Yeah. Like, do you feel like great about him as like a piece based on this year? I don't think I would. No. I wouldn't feel like you have like a locked in like really core piece of your Luka-centric future with him.
No, he doesn't play defense.
No. And like
I was throwing that to you, but I already had my opinion. You weren't going to sway me. I would not re-sign Christian Wood. I think I would move on. And then so really you're looking at what can you get back for Tim Hardaway Jr., Maxi Kleber, Davis Bertans. Bertans really just is money, right? It's not like he's valued.
Yeah. And then they don't have trade picks now, and blah, blah, blah.
They don't have their first round this year, but they'll have them from 24 to 28. So, like you said, on draft night they can officially like start to trade their picks again. So you have one more swing from a trade standpoint, and if you can get something fairly solid, maybe you try to look for a sign and trade for Wood. I don't know if you'll get it. You could go into next year with Kleber. Well, I guess I put Kleber in the trade possibilities. Whatever. Let's say just it's Kyrie, Luka, Josh Green, Jaden Hardy, probably JaVale McGee, right? And then something you're getting back in another big trade. Let's say it's somebody around the caliber of like Chris Middleton. Maybe it's not that good, but like a solid but not star level player. I guess Middleton's a little better than that. That's like you can get your third piece, and then you just are pretty barren with role players, and then that's your team. But they've fast forwarded this with the Kyrie trade to a point where they just kind of have to nail it pretty quick. And I don't know, but this final week of the season for them is going to be pretty important to see where do they go, and is how big of a failure is this season.
Yeah, it feels kind of like a step backward to some degree.
All right, what's your next one?
That's just not a fun place to be with Luka. Okay, my next one. We'll go to my number one. How does the Western Conference shake out in terms of playoff seeding? Things are super tight. Things are cramped. Mm-hmm. Things are chaotic. You look at you look at the playoff probability report right now, Brendan, and like things are all over the place. Like Denver's pretty locked in.
Is this something you get like emailed to your inbox from like the league? What is this? I've never heard of this thing.
Okay, I'm gonna put it in our chat right now. It's the Basketball Reference has it. It's on their homepage.
Oh, okay. You were just saying it in such an official.
Official
title.
I just assumed you like knew this, and like I look at it.
I'm imagining like a briefcase with a manila folder in it that somebody like brings into your apartment every day and just like hands it. Sir, we have your report, and then you just take it out.
I'm clearly that vital to like understanding like
how I feel.
Well, I mean, look, you just
okay. I found it on the homepage.
Yeah, I mean, I also just sent the link. So like, you know what? Did you? I'm putting. You're learning something new. Don't say I never gave you anything, Brendan. I told you about the basketball report. So like, Denver locked in at 1, Memphis pretty locked in at 2, Sacramento locked in at 3, Suns pretty locked in at 4. But you go below that, and like no one has like above 50% like probability of like locking in their seed right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, I the upward mobility of the Wolves right now feels more in question just because Naz Reid gets hurt, and you know he's such a big part of their team, such a key bench piece for them. But like, I'm sure the Warriors like might like end up at 6. Like the Pelicans have made this surge. Like the Clippers are there. The Lakers are playing really well and like have just like honestly looked like really legitimately good of late. The Wolves are there. The Thunder are there. We'll see if the Mavericks have to sneak in, but like all of these jockeying for seeding and like how much you can even control aside from just like trying to win games to get the right matchup for your team, it's going to dictate a lot of things. Like we could get Warriors Suns in round 1, or we could get Warriors Kings in round 1. And like I'm sure the Warriors and the Suns, if you gave them true serum, would probably be like, you know what? If I'm the Suns, maybe I just get the Pelicans, get to exercise those demons with Kevin Durant, and maybe the Warriors say like Draymond Green already did kind of say this under the guise of wanting to like keep travel local in Northern California, but he's like, I'd like to play the Sacramento Kings. Like, and how does LeBron like search his way into like a really crazy first round match with some kind, or
Here's
do they
my
try
thing.
to?
Let me jump in there because my take and one of my questions was just who I put it as who gets the 6 seeds. In both conferences, but we can start with the West. I feel like the Lakers have a situation right now where they've played 2 fewer games than the Clippers and 1 fewer game than the Pelicans. So their record is only 1 game above 500, but not really, right? Because they're at a disadvantage in terms of games played. Their final stretch here, they beat Minnesota on Friday, very solid win. Anthony Davis was a monster. He almost had to leave the game, and then he just scored like what felt like 100 points in a row in the second half, made Rudy Gobert look like a joke. Actually, I have a Rudy Gobert question here as one of mine, so we'll get to that.
A what?
The Lakers have.
A why?
Yeah, I do. It's because we're going to have some fun. That's why.
Okay.
So we have at Houston for the Lakers on Sunday, the day we're recording. I would imagine that's a W. We don't have to hold our breath too much. At Utah, at the Clippers, home against the Suns, and then home against the Jazz. I would say Houston, Utah, and Utah are wins. I think that they very much have the ability to beat the Clippers or the Suns. So if let's say the Lakers let's say they go 3-2, that would put them at 42-40 for the season. I'm not convinced that the Warriors or Clippers necessarily finish better than that because the Warriors have a much tougher schedule and 3 of their 4 games are on the road, which is as close to a sure thing loss as exists for them. I don't know what Denver's injury report looks like on Sunday. That'll affect things. But my main point here is I'm feeling like the Lakers being the 5 seed is a fairly decent likelihood outcome here, and I don't think many people are thinking of it that way. I know the Pelicans will factor in here as well. It's far from a sure thing, but that's pretty crazy to think after how their season started and all the questions that we've had about them that they could surge all the way to 5. And I'm just going to go ahead and pick them. I'm going to say the West shakes out as Lakers, Clippers, Warriors, Pelicans, 5-8. And that's I guess I won't say Pelicans like win the play-in, but I just mean that they'll be the 8th seed. That's my pick. I'm just going to go crazy with it. What else do we have to talk about here? It's the final week of the season. Let's go.
Lakers Suns is just like a delicious.
I also just want it. Yeah. You figured me out. That's really all it is. I just want that. But
look, I want
Cavs
Knicks. Like I want us to both get to see fun series in person. Like I'll get to see Cavs Knicks, and like there's going to be some drama I think in that one. Will someone recreate the Andre Drummond meme from the last time these teams won the playoffs? Like I hope so.
Or the Jay Crowder meme, yeah.
Yeah, I need all of the energy in that one.
Let me ask you this then. If we're in somewhat of an agreement that that's a possibility, it's not the most likely outcome.
It's
Your little report that you mailed me real quick from the Secret Service has the Lakers with a 9.8% chance of getting the 5th seed.
People say they wonder like what is Joe Biden doing for this country? He's actually just crunching this report every day for me personally.
It's one of the most important jobs in America, so I'm glad we have our best doing it.
That's right.
The Suns and the Lakers. If I just said that's what happens and my random guess ends up being correct, that would be an all-timer. Who wins it?
Suns in 7.
7. I think I would still go Suns in 6, but the Lakers are legit. We talked about them last week. So let's say the Clippers get 6 then, like I'm making up here too. Clippers Kings. What's your pick?
Kings in 6.
Yeah, no PG is rough there. I would say Kings in 7. I'd have a hard time imagining them closing it out on the road, but I think a Game 7 with the Kings beating the Clippers would just be an awesome moment for the NBA, so I want that. But yeah, this is very much in flux. That's why I'm kind of just locking something in and going with it. That's gonna be my guess. Who do you think gets 10 between Oklahoma City and the Mavs?
I'm gonna go Oklahoma City. That's what I want in this world.
The Mavs have played one more game. Oh no, they haven't. They're at the same amount of games. But it doesn't really feel like the Mavs are gonna. They lost to the Heat by a bunch on Saturday, which was probably one of the biggest games of their season, and it just didn't feel like they were like super interested in meeting that moment. So I don't have a lot of faith.
Yeah, I would like the Thunder just to get them to get the reps, to get Shea on that stage, to at least them to kind of be rewarded for some of the stuff they've done this year. That feels like basketball. The basketball gods like putting their thumb on the scale in a positive direction to me.
All right, my last thing on the standings for me would just be who gets the 6 seeds. It feels like the Nets are going to get 6 over Miami.
Yeah. Yes.
They have a pretty easy schedule, and they're, I think, 2 or 1.5 games up. So it would take like a collapse by Brooklyn to not get 6.
76ers Nets getting it without like all of the added intrigue just feels like a little bit of a bummer, but you know.
And no Ben Simmons playing to even have that element because he just went home.
Yeah, so I think Philly probably wins that one in like 5.
Yeah, well, good for them.
Yeah.
They also played a few years ago, and I think they won in 5 the year before Kyrie and KD came. Okay, let's get to my Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, what is this
question here? My question is Rudy Gobert running a social experiment? Is his march was his march into April just like a big lead up to April Fool's Day? Is he mad that Victor Wembanyama is going to become the most famous French player in the league and this is just like him acting out? You had he got fined this week for an insane diatribe about NBA officiating, which we did talk about. He said, as a basketball player that's been in this league for so long, it's disrespectful and it sucks, the officiating. I think you want to see KD in the playoffs, Steph in the playoffs, you want to see LeBron in the playoffs, and the Timberwolves are just not there yet. So there was that. And then, did you see what he said about Anthony Davis?
So I googled Rudy Gobert, and I'm now reading a story written by our friend Bill DiFilippo at Dime, aggregating the comments. And
so he said,
Moore had this, yeah.
As I mentioned, Davis played amazing in the second half on Friday night to beat Minnesota and basically lock in that the Lakers were going to finish above Minnesota in the standings. Gobert said that the fall that AD took where he turned his ankle and almost had to go out of the game, the fact that Gobert chose not to like land on him or dunk on top of his fallen down body was a turning point that he sort of allowed the Lakers to have. So here's the exact quote. He said, "I had the ball in my hands and I could have went and dunked it, but AD was laying there. So I was like, that's too ruthless. I'll just pass it out." After that, it was just turnover after turnover. It was just a tough stretch. Is this man real? Is he serious? Is he a robot person? Did AI actually like develop faster than we realize and it's infiltrated Rudy Gobert's brain? What is happening? This man cannot help himself.
The LeBron pass, by the way, after like that sequence where he like just kind of like he after the miss, when he just like kind of like floats it ahead to D'Lo, it's just like one like catches it, hits it immediately, and I'm just like, oh, LeBron's still pretty great. Yeah, I don't know, and like he's even more important now for them because Naz Reid is out. Like they kind of need him to like be even more, and like he's obviously I think looked better since they got Mike Conley. Mike Conley seems to know how to play with him and feed him and all that stuff.
I gave you a softball to make fun of Rudy Gobert, and you're not taking it at all.
He just baffles me. He just really baffles me because like I don't I don't understand like what he's trying to accomplish with these comments of late, particularly the officiating.
It's a social
ones.
experiment. That's why I asked it that way. I feel like he's just punking all of us. This is this man gets picked last in every All-Star draft, by the way. He's a weirdo. He says weird things. I don't understand.
Okay, what I need is an Anthony Edwards cam every time Rudy Gobert is not doing media.
I think Ant just lets everybody do their thing. I think,
but I just like you just know he would have some reactions. You know what I mean?
I'm sure in his head he's like, this is exactly why you understand why things fell out with Donovan, right? Like we don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but it's like, just say normal stuff, dude. Like, we lost. Yeah, we just needed to play better. We really needed to beat that Lakers team, and we weren't able to, and that's that. Like it just whatever. It's bizarre. Rudy Gobert is a weirdo. It's fine.
Just don't
He's
be
good.
Don't
He's
be
a great defender, but
don't be weird. Being a bad hang is like truly like an underrated asset.
Yeah, true.
That should be a cool. That should be a cool graphic with Rudy Gobert on it. That's going to be one of my pull-outs for this. That's one of my pull-outs for this one. Okay. Being a bad hang is an underrated skill. That's there it is. All right. Okay, we have to hit this one, Brendan. I think this is a must. Does anyone pulling ahead of the MVP race in these last stretch of games? The new poll from Tim Bontemps has it very close, with Jokic getting more first place votes, but Embiid getting more votes, getting more second and third place votes. It seems like it's going to be one of those two guys. I think the last time I looked at BetMGM, their odds were even. I'd have to double check that again, but I think we're very much in a place where like this is going to come down to the wire. And does anyone have like a signature moment, a big kind of moment on a big stage, some kind of performance? Does that happen this week and kind of give us kind of a winner in the MVP race that has become like not very fun in a lot of ways?
It's funny that the Bucks Nuggets game from last weekend just didn't affect anything. Like that was supposed to be one of these big duels, and the Nuggets won that game pretty convincingly. Giannis did not play up to his normal standard.
Well, and then
whatever. Give it to
Giannis. I think Giannis feels out of it to me a little bit, just because of that game, and also maybe because of that Celtics game. I probably think Giannis is the best player in the league. And like, there's a case that he's just like he's the best player on the best team in the league, and like maybe just give that guy the MVP. But like he's had these couple of games where I wonder if that's gonna ding him. And like then you have Dame this week saying he thinks it should go to Embiid, and like I wouldn't doubt that that's like a pretty popular player sentiment if you
so
ask.
Embiid on BetMGM right now is -185, Jokic is +160, and Giannis is +800.
Okay, so it's down to we're at Embiid and Jokic. That's where this is.
What's so crazy to me is like the Nuggets and Sixers are both going to win, and this was basically like you said in the straw poll, like a three-way, close to a three-way tie, but Giannis was a little bit behind the pack, and so the odds kind of back that up. But the Nuggets and Sixers are both going to end up with like 52, 53, 54 wins. The Bucks are going to get close to 60, and it just feels like that doesn't matter here.
They're the best team in the league. They're the favorites to win the title. Yeah,
they're going to be several wins past the other two teams with MVP candidates on them. I know the Celtics factor in here too, but Tatum's not really in the running. So that just feels crazy that doesn't matter. I feel like we have already sort of just accepted the relentless dominance of Giannis and just moved on.
Which is, I think, always a mistake. I think when we do that, it takes some of this, like, not for granted per se, but like kind of for granted. It feels like a mistake to me.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Embiid.
If you had a vote for, I agree with you. I don't mind that from like a just give this guy an award, and I think he wants it and all that stuff. Still
he deserves one out of this stretch. Like it would be a crime if he went these three crazy dominant peak seasons and didn't even have one to show for it. So it'll feel fair, I think, in history for whatever that's worth.
Yes. Okay. If you had a vote,
you going to ask me who I would pick?
Yeah. If you had a vote, who would you pick? Who would you vote for?
I would vote for Giannis.
I think I would too.
Well,
maybe I just
both dummies.
I'll just vote for Naz Reid, actually.
Vote for Kyle Anderson. He's the MVP of the league, honestly.
Just voting for
team go.
Voting for Mike Conley, but only after the trade.
one half season of Michael.
Yeah, just
Conley
Mike
Jr.
Wolves Mike Conley, who's making defensive plays that he hasn't made in like a couple of years, and like is making Rudy Gobert like a functional offensive big. That's my vote.
All right. Do you have one more?
I have one more.
Go for it.
Okay, so this is about your team, the team you cover. What clicks and what doesn't with the Phoenix Suns over this final stretch of the season? Hard schedule, some big games. Obviously, they just played the Nuggets and Jokic didn't play, and that took some of the fun out of it. Yeah, no, like that took a lot of the fun out of it. We are in like this weird nebulous stretch of the season where you're not always going to get like the games you might have seen in December or something when everyone is not kind of prioritizing rest and things. That's like one of the weird quirks of the NBA season that seems to happen around March Madness, and it's kind of it's not particularly fun.
Thankfully, we have Caitlin Clark.
Yes,
to keep our entertainment.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let me answer your question. What clicks and what doesn't?
This is the thing I would say that I want to see where your head is at on this. I think as of today, I'm picking them to get out of the West.
Yeah.
If you had to tell me today who do I think is playing in the NBA Finals against the winner of the East, I think it's the Suns. But I also tend to think that the rest of these games matter for them just in terms of figuring out flow, figuring out some lineup combinations, just figuring out things that they're comfortable with, and staying healthy, obviously. But I just feel like if they just establish some kind of momentum, things look really potent for them in the playoffs. I just trust the talent so much. I like Monty Williams as a coach. I think the role guys will be good enough, and I think Durant's going to be like outstanding off of Booker and off of Paul.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm at. But I also just am like, do I need to put weight into these end of the season stuff, or should I just like ride the wave no matter what happens?
I think you can put stock into the games just because it's the only evidence we're going to have. You kind of have to, but
yeah,
I'll give you my answer to this question, and then I'll give you Kevin Durant's answer to this question because he had a pretty good one. Still crazy that I covered that person. I don't really understand that. But my answer is what I'm looking at the most, what I think will click, what can click, what's going to start to look better than it has, is I think we are starting to see a better version of Chris Paul than we have the rest of the season. And I guess, hats off to the man. He pulled off a similar type of social experiment to what we just talked about with Rudy Gobert by not playing well for most of the year and then turning it on when he needed to. So, props to him that it worked out. But he's shooting 44% from the field in March, 31% from three. Nothing elite. Usage is low, but there's just been more aggressiveness lately from him that I think it bodes well for, there were just a lot of these games where he was not even looking to score, not even looking to get to his elbow jumper that he's so great at, passing up open catch and shoot threes and looking out of rhythm there, all this stuff. That's kind of starting to go away. There were games even like the Minnesota game they played when Durant finally came back. He was like taking floaters and layups at the basket against Rudy Gobert. And did they all go in? I don't even know if any of them went in, but it's just a matter of seeing him do that and the little signs that he's starting to attack more. So I think that's what we'll see. I think the other thing, Durant's answer when he was asked about what his focus is the last few games is he said the defensive game plan. And I think for them to be able to win the number of games that they're going to need to and face the different types of matchups that we know they're going to have to face, whether you think, guarding Jokic is very different than guarding Steph Curry, right? Guarding the Warriors offense versus the Nuggets offense. Even the Clippers with their ISO stuff, very different than how other teams are going to play. Whatever the case is, whoever they face, you're going to need to have versatility and variety to your scheme about how you're guarding, how you're approaching, how you're game planning. Durant unlocks a ton of options for them. But that's an area where I think it won't just be as simple as let's roll the ball out and make it happen. And so I will be watching that. They play Oklahoma City with their 5-out stuff on Sunday right after we record this. They face the Spurs, whatever, not going to be a super illustrative game. But then they close with the Lakers and Clippers and the Nuggets after that. Thursday, Saturday, Sunday or something. So that's going to be very interesting how those last three games go, including the Thunder game. So I guess that's 4 of how experimental, how much do they really push the limitations of what Durant can do as a weak side rim protector, as a wing defender, as a help guy to really get comfortable being more aggressive than they have been and realizing, look, hey, we don't have 6'6" Jay Crowder as our help man anymore. We have a 7-footer that's one of the best defenders in the league. And let's see what we can do there. Like, let's take the car for a spin. And that's what I'm excited to see too, but that's what Durant said he's focused on. So I guess take it from the smarter of the two of us between myself and Durant. That's probably the better place to go.
Yeah, well, Kevin Durant does have a podcast. I was going to make a joke that Kevin Durant does a podcast, but he doesn't in fact have a podcast.
He has his own.
Yeah,
Infrequent, but it exists.
It's a flex. Maybe it's more of a flex you can just like drop like whenever you have time,
Yeah, whatever. I'm my own boss. I'll hit the mic when I need to. Otherwise, I'm gonna go make millions shooting a ball. See you in 3 weeks when the next episode comes out.
Scale of 1 to 10, how confident you are that they like are just going to be in peak form in the playoffs. Like how confident would you say you are that this team kind of meets its upper limits in the playoffs?
I mean, I think by the second, third round, we will start to see some pretty sick stuff. I think the honest reality, without trying to sound too much like a cocky homer asshole, is I don't think they really need to, man. I think that they're really good. They've played 100, and this is from Shane Young, covers the league for Forbes. Played 192 possessions together. The foursome, Booker, Paul, Durant, Ayton. They are plus 28.2 per 100 possessions. They've allowed less than 97 points per and scored 125. It's the best foursome in the league. It's the best fivesome in the league. Whoever the fifth guy is, it's the best talent in the league. I think it's just a matter of, can they beat the collective of what Boston and Milwaukee are, of what Denver is, of what Golden State is. But they don't even need to be at their best, I think, to beat a lot of these teams.
Do you have any more, or have we wrapped?
That's it. I had Wemby, who gets the second best odds for Wemby, because this Spurs-Rockets game on Friday night was actually the Pistons-Rockets game was actually really huge, and Houston won it, which means they lost it. And so that was a little subplot, but the Pistons are going to get the best odds, and we'll see who gets second between Houston and San Antonio. But I saved it for last because I don't think anyone cares.
I just did a tankathon sim. Here's the top 5. You ready for this? It's a little chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
Portland, number 1 pick.
Their plan paid off. Dame is staying.
Washington, second.
They don't deserve that.
Houston, third. Detroit, 4th. San Antonio, 5th. Charlotte, 6th. That's the top 6.
I sincerely hope, for the sake of content, that when we hit record on lottery night, that is what happens, because people would care.
Yeah.
If Detroit gets the number 1 pick, or if San Antonio gets the number 1 pick, I feel like people are going to just be like, the comment section of ESPN's post of the results is just going to be complete hatred and chaos of like all these 16-year-old basketball fans just crying out for something that they don't feel like Detroit and San Antonio deserve. Did you see the pull-up 3 put-back dunk that he had right before we hit record?
I did. I was gonna text that to you, and there's something else I was gonna text you. But I'll tell you after we're done recording, because I got a couple texts about something not related to the NBA that you will care deeply about, and troubling.
I want the Spurs to get Wemby. That's where I'm at.
I do too. I want one.
They deserve it.
Pops.
They're well run. It's good structure for him. Like, I don't think the Spurs are like some sexy team at all, obviously, but I just think it's the best outcome for his career. And when great players come into the league, I don't want them to be toiling away in bad situations. So the Tony Parker connection, all that stuff. Give me the Spurs. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I agree. Brendan, we're finishing this up right before the women's national title game. Just give me your pick. We'll see if we're right on Tuesday. I'm picking Iowa.
I'm picking Iowa, yeah. You gotta ride the wave at a certain point. I didn't think she would beat South Carolina, and she did, so I'm not gonna pick against her again.
If we're wrong, congratulations to the Bayou Barbie and the entire LSU team for winning, and whatever insane thing Kim Mulkey will be wearing.
And saying.
Also saying. All right, that's going to be it for the Just Basketball Show for Monday, April 3rd. Thanks again to Jake Stevens and Dillon Heiser for their production help. Remember, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform of choice if you've not already. subscribe and hit that notification bell on the YouTube channel. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and your social media platforms of choice. I'm Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen, back at you with another episode on Tuesday.